So I'm going to go ahead and get started. My name is Tina Knox. I am the coordinator of undergraduate instruction and advising for MCB, and I'd like to welcome you all today. We're going to be talking about undergraduate research in the School of MCB. I have a bit of an agenda for you, just so you can know what to look forward to. So we've got a special guest that's going to give you a few pieces of information about biochemistry specifically, if there are biochem students here. Then I'm going to talk to you about what undergraduate research is and what's expected of you in MCB, how to find a lab, what the procedures are for enrolling in the courses, MCB 290 or Biochem 290, which is undergraduate research. Then we're going to have a couple of guest faculty speakers, and they're going to talk to you about what they look for in an undergraduate researcher. And then we are going to have 3 different students who are currently doing research and have been for a while. They're going to come and talk to you about their perspective. If we have time at the end, then I'm going to talk to you about graduation with distinction, which is something that you can do if you start doing research and you do it consistently. That could be a whole talk in and of itself, so I'll just give you the nuts and bolts of that if we have time. If not, we will be posting these slides and the video, we're taking video today, on our undergraduate research website. Okay? So I'm going to go ahead and introduce Jeff Goldberg, and he's going to speak to any biochemistry students who might be present.
Hi, hello, thank you, Tina. Before I get started, are there any biochemistry students in the room? Raise your hand. If not, this will be the shortest talk you have all semester. Is there anybody who wants to transfer to biochemistry? The great major that it is. Still no hands?
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming, Jeff.
You bet.
You want to tell a joke on your way out?
Well, no. Well, there's a priest or no.
So usually Jeff doesn't hesitate to stand on the stage and perform for people, so I was pretty sure that would happen. Okay, so I know there's no biochemistry students in the room. Let me give an idea, show of hands, who I'm speaking to today. How many of you are freshmen? Nice. Good. Okay. How many of you are sophomores? Good. Juniors? Seniors? Okay. So, and how many of you are biology or MCB majors? Is there anybody in a different major? What's your major?
iHealth.
iHealth?
Agriculture and biology.
But you're switching, right? Okay, I just recognized you. Okay, so I'm talking to mostly MCB majors. Are you interested in switching to MCB at any point, or are you just...
Yeah.
Okay, good. So what I'm talking about today is going to be very specific to students in biology, biochemistry, or MCB. And I will keep in mind that there are no biochemistry students here, so that will make some of this go a little bit quicker. The first thing I wanted to do is just talk to you about what undergraduate research is and what we consider it to be specifically in the School of Molecular and Cellular Biology. So the good news for you is you are all students at a Research 1 institution, the University of Illinois. One of the 3 main missions for the University of Illinois is research. So you're very lucky in that there are lots of opportunities for you to conduct research on this campus, whether it be in the School of MCB or in another department or college on campus. And we really encourage you, especially as scientists, to get involved in research, to learn what it's like to work in a lab. So if you are interested in doing that, which I assume most of you are because you came today, then what you will be doing is signing up to work with a professor in a lab on this campus, and either that professor, who we also refer to as the principal investigator or the PI, that professor or one of that professor's graduate students or a postdoctoral employee in the lab will work with you. And when you first get started, they'll probably have you do things like read background information, papers that they're doing in lab. They will teach you some techniques in the lab, and you'll probably be helping someone else with a project. The longer you're there and the more that you learn, then you can sort of transfer all of the skills that you've learned into a project of your own in some cases. So that's what research is like in MCB. For the most part, our students will earn course credit for this. So we have a course called MCB 290, it's Undergraduate Research, and you can earn credit hours for working in a research lab. There are a few paid positions for research on campus. I don't know what those are. If you find them, then you got lucky, because there are not a lot of them around. Most students choose to get course credit. Okay. Oh, that was a sneak peek. Okay, so why do you guys want to do undergraduate research? What are you interested in, and what brought you to this talk today? Should have brought prizes to throw. I have virtual prizes. You get a virtual high five if you answer a question. What do you want to learn? Why do you want to do undergraduate research? What do you want to learn in the lab? Yeah.
Just to gain experience, in the research lab. So when I get ready to apply to med school, I can say that when I have some.
Okay, so you want to gain some sort of experience, right? So you can use that when you're looking for a job or grad school. What other reasons? Yeah.
I want to contribute to the advancement of our current knowledge.
Wonderful. So contributing to the advancement of current knowledge. Did I see a hand over here?
I want to figure out and narrow down exactly what research
Okay, so you want to use this as an opportunity to decide what you like and what you don't like. So when you go to graduate school or get a job later, you know what works for you and what doesn't. Very good. So here are some reasons to get involved in research other than what you just mentioned here. Getting to experience cutting edge science. So in your classes, you're going to be learning the foundational information that you need to use in a research lab. But when you work with faculty, they are doing cutting edge research using state-of-the-art technology. You get to experience that as an undergraduate and decide, is this maybe something I want to do? Do I want to go to graduate school and further my research interests? Do I want to get a master's? Do I want to get a PhD? Maybe, do I not like research? And so I tried it, I don't like it, and now I know that that is not the career path for me. So these are a lot of reasons that people get involved in research and some of the things that you can get out of them. Even if you decide it's not for you, if you don't like it, you will learn some critical thinking skills, problem solving skills that will help you no matter what career you go into. So it's a very good opportunity, and it's a nice chance to get to know some faculty in a smaller group setting. Okay, so who is eligible for this? So students who are declared majors in biology, MCB, or biochemistry can earn MCB 290 research credit. So if you are not a declared major, you won't be able to earn this course credit for it until you declare one of the three majors that are up on the screen. There are some instances where our faculty need someone from a different major or want to work with someone from a different major. And if they make a case for you, then sometimes a non-major can do research. But for the most part, this is just going to be declared majors in MCB, biology, or biochemistry. To earn the credit, you have to do this in an approved lab. So any faculty member in the School of MCB is eligible for MCB 290 research credit. There are some instances, actually quite a few instances, where you can earn credit by doing research in a non-MCB lab. And basically what that requires is that you write a proposal with the faculty member, a short proposal, like less than one page. You write a proposal for what the research is that you're going to be doing, and a lot of it is very applicable to molecular and cellular biology. It gets approved, and then you can sign up for MCB 290 in a non-MCB lab. We recommend that you don't do research unless you're in good academic standing. We recommend a minimum GPA of 3.0. Now this is recommended. That doesn't mean if you're lower than that you can't do research. One of the things you're going to see on a later slide is there are some faculty who do not care what your GPA is. They just want to know if you're a hard worker and if you will get the work in lab done. Now, the reason that we suggest this, and as an academic advisor, because that's one of the hats that I wear, is that if you are struggling with your academics, doing undergraduate research is going to take time away from your academics. And so that's where it worries us. So think carefully about the time that you have to devote to extracurriculars, to your academics, and to research. Okay. So a couple of notes here. It's important that you realize that you cannot be paid and earn course credit for MCB 290 or Biochem 290. It's one or the other. You get course credit or you get paid. Most of the time it's course credit. And the other thing is you have to register for the course by the university deadlines. So you can add a course up until the 10th day of class during the regular semester or till the 7th day of class during the summer semester. Those are our deadlines for adding MCB 290. Okay, so you want to make sure to pay attention to deadlines. If you have any general questions, we have an entire website right here that you can go to. You can see past videos that we've done. You can hear from students who are doing research. You can read about students who are doing research. You can see all the information about our forms and deadlines there. All right, so a typical workload. This is a course, MCB 290. 1 credit hour of that is equal to about 5 hours a week in lab. I would say just starting off, most students will do 1 or 2 credit hours, so that's 5 to 10 hours a week in lab. Once you get more involved in research, you're probably going to be looking at 2 to 3 credit hours. What I will say is this is our recommendation. The School of MCB recommends 1 credit hour for every 5 hours spent in lab. That does not mean that every faculty member on campus will adhere to this. And one of the things that I'm going to say to you today is wherever you end up working, you need to have discussions with the faculty that you are working with about what their expectations are. So if you sign up for 1 credit hour, is this what they expect? Because if it isn't, they're going to be giving you a grade at the end, and you need to know what their expectations are. So that's the next point. Always have a discussion with the person you're working with. Make sure you know when they expect you to be in lab, how much work they want you to get done. Do you need to attend lab meetings? Do you need to attend journal club meetings? What do they want you to do so that you can get a grade in that course? One of the questions that I get after students start doing research is there a limit to the number of hours that I can do? The answer to that is yes and no. So technically, there is a 10-hour limit for the amount of MCB 290, which is independent research, that you can count towards the 120 hours that you need to graduate. Now, I encourage you, if you get started in research and you are enjoying it and you have a good relationship with the faculty person that you are working with, that you continue doing it. All research that you do, no matter how many credit hours it adds up to, will show on your transcript. You will get a grade for all of that. That will stay in the transcript. It will factor into your GPA. The only limit is what can count towards your 120 hours. And most MCB students do not have a problem at all hitting their 120 hours for graduation. Does anybody have any questions about that? Okay, so I think one of the main things you all want to know is how do I find research, right? So these are some 5 basic steps that you want to go over to find research in MCB. So the first thing is to come to something like this and or review all of the information that we have on our undergraduate research website. Then you're going to read about faculty research interests. You're going to make a list of faculty that you would like to work with, and then you're going to create an online student profile and then contact faculty. So let's break this down a little bit. The website that we have that I gave you the URL to earlier, it's basically, if you just search Undergraduate Research MCB, you will find this website. You can find tons of information. We have all of the forms that you need to earn course credit. We have summer forms, we have renewal forms, we have handouts about undergraduate research, we have some past video interviews with students, we've got some written articles about students who did undergraduate research, we have videos, things like that. So if you're not sure where to go after today, go back to that website and see what all is on there. That'll get you started. The next thing, and probably one of the most important things that you'll do, is research the faculty on this campus. Find out who you want to work with, get their contact information, and the way you do that is you can go to this website here. So you could take a picture of it, you could write it down, but you could also just search faculty research interests, MCB, and you'll get that. And then what you'll see is, once you get to that page, you can search faculty if you know their name by last name. You could do it by department. So if you're really interested in cell and developmental biology, you can look at all of the faculty who are doing research in that department. You can click on research interests to get a list of all of the different research interests in the School of MCB. If you want to specifically work on disease, we have a link that just goes to the disease research interests. And then we have some video interviews that our MCB honors students have put together over the past several semesters. So you can look at that in a lot of different ways. And then once you find a faculty profile, this is something similar to what you'll see. So this is Stephanie Seaman. She's a professor in cell and developmental biology. And what you'll see is her main research topics listed up here. You've got her contact information, where she went to school. She teaches a graduate course in the medical school, and she does occasionally teach this undergraduate course. But you can see her main research topics. You can read a little bit about that. And then you can see some of her past presentations, or presentations and publications. So what I encourage you to do is look at our faculty, look at their different research profiles, make a list of those that are doing something that you are interested in learning more about, and then you will contact them based on that. There are a lot of you, and only about 50 to 60 faculty in the School of MCB. So there's going to be some competition. So don't just pick one faculty member that you want to work with and just email that person, and if they say no, then you're like, I can't find research. You're going to have to ask more than one person, and timing is important. Now here's the thing, I can't tell you when the best time to ask them is. I can give you some recommendations, but it's based on who they have in their lab that's a graduate student that has time to work with you. It's whether or not they have a project that's available to you. Maybe they have a student who just graduated and so now they have a spot open, but I can't predict when that will be. So you might have to ask multiple people multiple times. All right. So the next thing that you want to do is to create this online student profile. This is like an online resume. So you're going to log in as a student, you're going to provide information about your name, your UIN, what semester you are in school, not what year you are in school, how many semesters you've been on this campus. It's going to ask you about the courses that you've taken, the grades that you've earned in those, what your major GPA is. Just a show of hands, how many of you know how to find your major GPA? Not very many. Okay, so I'm going to tell you a little bit about it, but if you're not sure, ask your academic advisor. If you run a degree audit, those of you who are freshmen probably haven't heard about degree audits yet, but it's a DARS. You're going to learn about that in your LAS 101 or 122 course. You can run that, and when you do, you have several different GPAs. You have a cumulative GPA. You might have a transfer GPA if you took any community college courses, and then you have a major GPA. And for you in biology, that's going to be the biology, the chemistry, the physics, and the math that you've taken. But there is a section about right underneath the advanced courses required in MCB that gives you your major GPA, and you're going to look that up. So that's the kind of information that you'll put in. There is a place that you can write a short little essay about why you want to get involved in research. If you've ever done any type of research before, you can write about that. It is not required for you to have had previous research experience. Most of you haven't had that opportunity before, so don't be afraid to fill out this research profile if you've never done that. But basically what will happen, you will log in, you'll say the term that you're hoping to do research, you fill in this sort of information, and then the advising office will check this information. So one of the reasons that we have the profile system is this is information that in the past, MCB faculty have told us they would like to know about students before they get involved in research. And then what we do is fact check it. We make sure that the courses you put in are correct, that your grades that you put in, that your major GPA, that all of that is correct. We approve it, and then in about a week, we'll send you an email saying this has been approved. Here's a link that you can send out to MCB faculty that you're looking to work with. Okay, so any questions about the MCB student profile? One important thing to note about this is that it's only available to MCB and biochemistry students, and currently only MCB faculty or biochemistry faculty can see this. So if you end up looking for research in a non-MCB lab, then you're going to have to create your own online resume or take a screenshot of the one that we provide for you and send that to them. Okay, so the next thing to do is to contact faculty. I just recently did a survey of our faculty to double check what they prefer, and over 80% of them said they want students to contact them by email. 0% want you to call them, so do not call them. There were a couple that said they like to talk to students in person. I think that works out more if you're taking a class with them and you're talking to them maybe in office hours or before or after class, and it comes up that they're doing research that you're interested in, something to that effect. Then you might talk to them in person, but for the most part they want you to send them an email. Please make it professional. You're asking for a job, basically. So don't say, hey prof, I was looking online, it looks really cool that you work with bacteria, can I work in your lab? Don't do that. You need to have a salutation. Dear Dr. Blinky, my name is Tina. I am a junior in MCB. I have been looking online at your undergraduate research and I'm very interested in this, okay? Do you have any space in your lab? Thank you for your consideration, Tina Knox. Don't just not sign it. Please make it come from your university email so that they know that you are a legitimate person, and be professional. And you guys might be laughing at what I just said, like, hey prof, we get some really interesting emails. You're not texting them, you're not Snapchatting your friends, you are actually writing to them and asking them for a job, so please be professional. Make sure that you are specific to the lab. So this is where that research that I told you to do earlier comes in. Make sure you've looked at their profile online and that you have some idea of what they're doing. Now, they're not expecting you to be an expert. You're an undergraduate. Many of you said that you were freshmen wanting to get involved. So you probably haven't even finished MCB 150 or IB 150 yet. So they don't expect you to be an expert, but they do expect that you've looked and that you're not just sending the same form letter out to every single faculty member on this campus, okay? You might have to be patient and a little bit persistent. So you send out the email, faculty get tons of emails. And if they are not in the mode of thinking about needing an undergraduate researcher right at that moment, they may not get to it. Or maybe they have more pressing things, a grant proposal that's due that day that they can't get to. So they're most likely not going to answer you within 24 hours, know that, and some of them may not even answer you within a week. If you do not hear from them within about 5 days, you can send a follow-up, maybe just forward the previous email. I know you're probably busy, not sure if you saw my previous email. Do you have time to talk about a potential research position in your lab? Something like that. You might have to send that more than twice. You might have to reach out 3 times. I have had faculty tell me in the past that they will not respond to a student on the first request, that they want to know that they are interested enough in the lab that they will ask a second time. So be patient, be persistent, and always be professional. And you can send out emails to like 5 labs at a time if you want. I just wanted to show you some of the feedback that I got from the most recent faculty survey that I put out, just so you can get an idea. One of the take-home points from tonight is that each faculty member is going to have different expectations of you in their lab. So they don't all want the same thing, but this is what some of them said. They're looking for students preferably in their first or second year, so that they can have them at least 1 more year after spending a year training them. A year training them. So they're going to have to train you on what's going on in their lab, the techniques being used in their lab, and get you up to speed so that you can be a good resource for them and that you can get some real work done. And so that sometimes means a 2-year commitment. It's more important to me to see how they think about our work in particular. So this was in regards to the student profile. I said, do you use it? Do you care about it? They said that they might look at it, but they really care more about the fact that the student has done research on what's going on in the lab and can talk about it or ask questions about it. Don't answer emails that say I'm really interested in what you do without showing they really know. Nobody should be doing research for just 1 semester. In MCB, you can't get anything done in 1 semester. You can barely learn what's going on in the lab. So most of the time they're going to want you to commit to a minimum of 2 semesters. If the student's email is not specifically addressed to me, I delete it without further consideration. Again, Dear Dr. Blinky, my name is Tina. Make sure you're addressing the professor you're sending it to. And be careful if you're sending it to multiple professors that you don't get the names wrong. This is, so you can see some professors require a really big chunk of time, 12 hours a week in lab, preferably 3 to 4 hour blocks of time. When you're a freshman and a sophomore, sometimes that's hard to fit into your schedule, but you can keep in mind that this is what some faculty are looking for. And so then those same faculty usually say, if you have a heavy course load and a lot of extracurricular activities, they're discouraging you to apply. They really want you to be able to commit to time in the lab. If you're interested in going to graduate school, this is the best way for you to figure out if research is what you want to do with your life, and you are strongly encouraged to apply. One person said GPA is not important. Go back to what I said. That faculty member says GPA isn't important, and that's okay, but don't hurt yourself. You can't get into graduate school even if you've done undergraduate research if your grades are at a minimum. So do watch your grades and how much time you have to go to that. So different things here. All right, interview tips. If you do get an interview, again, treat this like a job. You don't have to dress up in a suit and tie, anything like that. In fact, faculty in MCB would probably think that was very strange. Nobody around here dresses like that unless there's some big important meeting to go to. But dress nicely, business casual. So slacks, a polo, button-down shirt, something like that. Come prepared. Make sure that you, again, have looked over the research they're doing and that you have some idea of what's going on in the lab. Most importantly, ask about their expectations. If they are going to take you on in the lab and you're going to sign up for MCB 290, this is going to show on your transcript and you are going to get a grade in the course. I said before, every faculty member has different expectations. Make sure you know what those are for the person that you're working with. How often do you want me in lab? What is required of me? Do I need to present a poster at a conference? What do I need to do well in your course? Be honest about your availability. Don't say that you're available every day for 5 hours if you're not, and I don't know what student that's an undergraduate is, so be very honest with them about what you are available to commit. Okay, so once you find a lab, you've got to enroll. To do that, you'll get a form. You can get those forms either from the advising office in 164 Burrell Hall, in the core curriculum office, which is currently in 252 Davenport Hall, or from our website. So that same website I've been telling you to go back to, you can get all of the forms. There's a form that's available if you're doing research in an MCB lab. There's one for non-MCB labs, and then there's one for senior thesis, which none of you are at that point to do. Pay close attention to deadlines. As I mentioned before, you've got till the 10th day of the semester in a regular semester to add a course, and through the 7th day of the summer to add a course. Once you get into a lab, it's really easy to renew. You don't have to fill out all the forms and start all over again. What you do need to do is go online and use our renewal form so that we know that you're going to do that again. I mentioned that there are lots of people on campus doing research. If for some reason you are unable to find a faculty member in the School of MCB to do research with, you can look at other places. This is not an exhaustive list, but this is where a lot of our students have worked in the past. And people in veterinary medicine, in crop sciences, places like that, they really enjoy getting MCB students because you guys learn about molecular genetics. And in 251, you learn a lot of molecular genetic techniques that they utilize in their labs. So you're a hot commodity in crop sciences for sure. We do have a couple of institutes on campus that have their own websites that you can go to. The Beckman Institute, you can go to the Institute for Genomic Biology and look at research that's being done there and reach out to different professors in those labs. If you do research in a non-MCB lab, there's a special form that you need to fill out to earn course credit. So if you find a spot in crop sciences, we can't sign you up under MCB 290 in a crop science faculty member's lab because they don't have a section. But what we do is we put you under Melissa Michaels' section, so it'll be a special section, MCB 290 MM. In order to do that, you will have to fill out the non-MCB form, and you'll have to write just a short proposal, a couple of paragraphs that talks about what you specifically will be doing in the lab. Not the abstract of what's going on in faculty members' lab. What you specifically will be doing, you can do that in concert with the faculty member you're working with or the graduate student you're working with. They sign off on it. We approve it in the core curriculum office. That's 252 Davenport. We approve most of them if they have any reasonable relationship to molecular and cellular biology. So again, you are not limited to MCB, but keep in mind that there are strict deadlines, that they don't do late ads, especially if it's a non-MCB lab. There are no exceptions to that. So, before I introduce our faculty, that was a speed overview of what research is, how to enroll in research, all of that, policies and procedures. Questions from you all? Yeah.
Is summer research any more or less popular than research going on during the spring and fall?
That's a good question. She asked about summer research and whether it was more popular than what's going on in the spring and fall. My personal opinion is, just from listening to students, is that it's easier to find a research position in the summer. Faculty tend to like that because you can commit to them for much larger chunks of time. It's a really good time to start research because you can learn about the lab throughout the summer, working close to 40 hours a week if you wanted to, depending on what else you were doing that summer. And then that way you'd be prepared in the fall to start a project. So yeah, I think summer is a really good time. If you are able to stay here during the summer, you can get a lot done. Other questions? Yeah. So she's asking if you need to take MCB 290 before you apply for an undergraduate research position. And the answer is no, you do not need to, and you can't. The only way to register for MCB 290 is to have found a faculty member that is going to allow you to work in their lab. And then there's a specific section that you sign up for based on who you're working with. Other questions? All right. Well, let me introduce one of our faculty members. Dr. Blinky is here. And I think I saw Dr. Yano sneak in. He might have stepped out for a minute. So Dr. Blinky is a professor in microbiology, and he takes on quite a few undergraduate researchers. I know he has a booming voice. Do you want the mic, or do you want to? We're videotaping.
I think I'm going to need the mic.
Okay, we're going to give him the mic, and I'll let him talk to you about what he expects of students in this lab.
Well, I'm getting mic'd up. It's great to see everyone. Tina really gave you a great overview, so I have to cover some of that. I'd reiterate, though, that when you do write a faculty member, make sure to personalize a little bit. And personally, I delete the ones that start with Dear Madam. Just my own thing. Yeah, I get about 1 of 20 that start with either Mrs. Blanky or Madam. So, I figured at least they haven't gone to the website at that point.
This is Dr. Yano. So we'll let Dr. Blinky talk first, and then we'll let Dr. Yano speak.
Okay, so again, it's great that you're here. It's great that you have interest in undergraduate research. This is, you probably hear this about a lot of things, but this is potentially a life-changing decision for probably many of you. I can say that because for myself, it was. So when I was an undergraduate several years ago, undergraduate research was not that common. It wasn't part of the culture of research at that time. And so I was very fortunate to get an undergraduate fellowship from the National Science Foundation to go do summer research. Someone just asked about summer research. And it was really a life-changing time for me. It really, my career just, well, I didn't have a career at that point, but my career plans really deviated very sharply at that point. And it was hard for me to believe, in fact, that one could make a living from discovery and investigation. It was just a concept that I couldn't really believe, you know. And I really haven't been sorry since then. So I think undergraduate research is important for a lot of things. I think regardless of what you do with your career, what your career plans are, I think the perspective you will get from doing research is unique. It's something that you won't encounter really in any of your undergraduate classes or laboratories, or really anywhere else. And I think that I've had undergraduates who've come back and told me that the perspective that they had when they were in lab, that they obtained in lab, has been really useful to them, no matter what they ended up doing. So Tina's asked that we give a faculty member's perspective about expectations, and so I'm going to talk a little bit about that. My laboratory, I'm in microbiology up in this building. We study, as Tina brought up there, we study microbe-host interactions, particularly those which are harmful to humans. And so this is, of course, a very exciting area of interest to us. I think throughout MCB, each laboratory, one of the great jewels here at the university is the type of research that's available to you to participate in. Okay, and this may be something that you'll need to think about if you decide to do this, which lab, in fact, to go to. I can say a lot about that. So how does the process work? In my laboratory, we've been very supportive of undergraduate research. We currently have 10 students doing MCB 290 research. I have 9 graduate students and a postdoc. And one of the reasons I'm so supportive is, of course, because I think it's a great opportunity for undergraduates, but also for the graduate students and postdoc in the lab. It's critical, all of them, no matter what they do, again, and once they get their advanced degree, their PhD, will be working with younger people, supervising, coaching, mentoring. And it's critical that they have that experience of learning how to do that. So we have an active program in lab for the mentors also, how to do this correctly. It's challenging but incredibly rewarding at the same time. So the way it works in our lab, and I think Tina alluded to this, every lab is different. And I think that's the #1 thing to keep in mind, is that every lab is different, every lab culture is different, and of course the research is different, but that's to be expected. So one of the things that you want to look for when you're looking for a lab is a culture that you think you'll be happy in, and this is maybe the most important thing I can tell you. The way we do it is a little bit different than most laboratories, I think. 3 times a year, we ask Tina to help us out by putting out some type of ad or whatever it is, a call for researchers. And what we do is we identify graduate students in the lab who have a project that looks really ripe and really exciting. And so we'll decide beforehand we need 2 people or 3 people or whatever it is. We typically have interviewed, so the first step is that prospective undergraduate researchers come in and talk to the people in the laboratory. In some ways that's more important than talking to me, and I'll come back to that in a moment. So typically we have between 30 and 50 people come in over the course of a couple weeks. And they'll talk directly with the person they would potentially be working with. And it's a great opportunity to do a lot of things. One is for graduate students to sometimes you can just meet someone and there's a good chemistry there. So graduate students, after a while, can really pick this out very well. This is a really important point. It's also a good time for you to see what your initial impression of the culture in the laboratory is. Talking to graduate students, the people who are in the lab every day, is a really important way to do this. So after a couple weeks, I'll usually get a list from them of maybe 5 to 6 people. And then I'll invite them in and we'll have an interview. And it's never like people expect. So if by chance any of you do decide that you're interested in what we do and want to come, you won't be surprised, but most people are. So my job during that interview first is to tell people what the advantages of doing undergraduate research are, and that's fairly easy to do. But then I try to talk them out of doing it. And the reason is because although it's a great opportunity, it's also a tremendous commitment to everyone involved, including yourself. Okay? And if you really don't want to do this, you're doing yourself a disservice by trying. Okay? But equally so, for the graduate students and postdocs in the lab, this is a tremendous commitment on their part. And what you'll find is that the person you're working with is completely committed and dedicated to you. It's really pretty fascinating, but this is almost 100% true. Okay, so at that meeting we lay out, you mentioned expectations, and really my expectations of anyone coming into the laboratory are just 3 things. One is the commitment part of it, and the commitment is pretty, on the surface, may sound pretty heavy. So we really synchronize things in the laboratory. So someone asked about summer. So the commitments for our lab is that when you start, you'll work all the way till you graduate. That you'll work in the summers. Okay. And we actually ask that people plan accordingly. So we have all our undergraduates start the day after final exams. And to work through, and then we ask everyone to take 3 weeks off at the end of the summer. Okay, this works very well for a lot of reasons I don't have time to go into, but it works extremely well. And then there's the whatever 15 hours a week or whatever it turns out to be, that commitment. Okay? So it's a big commitment. We know that for sure. And so number one, if you decide you can't do it, so I say go back and then talk to your parents. Your parents are supportive. Say that's a great idea, but really go tell them that. Say, I may not see you in June next year. And and in some cases, parents come back and say, no way. And if that's the case, that's great. It's better to know at that point in time. Okay, so commitment is number one. Consistency is number two. How many of you here play the violin? Maybe you got a couple. Or how about other instruments? Okay, so what happens when you stop practicing? You lose that skill. Research is more like playing a violin than it is riding a bicycle, right? You say, once you learn how to ride a bike, you never forget. It's true. Not so with things that are sort of higher order, like playing a violin. Research is like that. And so the consistency part of the equation is that 15 hours a week means 15 hours a week. And that 15, where is that 15 hours? It's not a magic number. What we found, in fact, is that when you get much less than about 12, there's this spinning of the wheels phenomenon, where someone comes in the lab every week and it's like starting over. And so if a person misses a week, this is very, very noticeable, very reproducible, this part of it. So we ask for consistency. But the most important thing, so we have commitment and consistency, but the most important thing is engagement. Engagement is number one. And by engagement, we mean sort of this approach to being in the lab that exceeds just spending the hours there, spending the time, but really approaching the problem you're working on in a deeper way than you may have ever done before. And there's a lot that goes into it, but it's very obvious when a person's engaged and when they're not engaged. At this meeting, so we have consistency and engagement. And we talk about grades immediately. So my philosophy is everyone each semester starts with an A, and you can only blow it after that. All right? And so how do you blow it? You don't fulfill those three aspects: the commitment, consistency, engagement. Okay, so our goal is that everyone who does this gets an A, that everyone be successful. And again, there's a lot of reasons to do this, including tangible and intangibles. How am I doing on time? 2 more minutes, okay. Once you get into the lab, the expectations are to fulfill those 3 requirements, but also we have meetings each week. We have an undergraduate meeting once a week where we talk about career development. So you have career development training also in the laboratory in addition to scientific. And so the expectation is that you come to all of these. One of the things that we do, and maybe other labs do as well, is that once we have that meeting at the beginning with me, I ask the student if they're still interested. So number one, I say, go talk to your parents. In 48 hours, let me know if you still want to do this or not. And about 1 out of 6 or 1 out of 7 say no. And I think it's, again, the best thing for everyone, probably. They can do it. The next thing they have to do is to write what is essentially a contract. It's more of a memorandum of understanding of what their understanding of the expectations are of them. But more importantly, I want them to lay out their expectations of us. Okay? Because you should have expectations of the laboratory you're entering. You should have some idea of what these expectations are. And if they're in line with what we believe they should be as well, it's usually a really, really good fit. Okay, I think I'm almost out of time. Do you have any quick questions? Okay, if you do, shoot me an email and you'd be happy to talk about it. You'll probably hear sort of a different perspective now, or maybe additional perspective, I should say.
Thank you, Dr. Blinky. So So Dr. Yano is a professor in molecular and integrative physiology. He also works in Beckman Institute, and he's just going to give you a little bit of background of what his lab is like and what his expectations are.
All right, so thanks very much. That was great. I actually really learned quite a bit right there in terms of ways of working with undergrads. So my lab now, we're about 7 years old. We've had maybe 40 or so undergrads come through the lab. And I'll say a few words about our approach to undergrads here in a minute. I do want to echo what Dr. Blinky said about my own personal experience with research when I was an undergrad. So I actually went here to the U of I many years ago. I feel like I've done a life sentence in Champaign-Urbana. But I came down here, like many of you guys, thinking I was going to come here for 4 years and then go off to medical school, and that would be it. I really hadn't considered research as a career ever. There was nobody in my family who was doing research. It just wasn't a thing that anybody did. But then I ended up joining a lab. There was a Howard Hughes Fellowship Program for a summer research opportunity, and I worked for a guy named Tony Waldrop. I don't know if you guys remember Tony. But I spent a summer doing research in that lab, and it was totally transformative for me. I had never experienced that kind of pace of work before, where you come in every morning, you spend 6 or 7 hours just setting up your experiment, physically setting up all the tubing and the various pieces of equipment, 3 or 4 more hours fighting with the equipment, and the last 2 or 3 hours collecting data. And it was really just an amazing, fun, exciting experience for me, and it really opened my eyes and literally changed my life, and that's what made me want to get a PhD ultimately. So I think there is this sort of latent opportunity that you guys may not realize by working in a lab. It may really open up vistas that you hadn't considered before. Of course, the other reason people join labs, as was mentioned before, it's a good experience. You're trying, many of you, to look at various health-related careers, and these kinds of experiences can help facilitate that process. So in terms of our lab, we do auditory neurophysiology research. We work on mice. We study how the auditory system functions, how various structures are connected to each other. We use imaging and electrophysiology techniques primarily with some anatomy. And when it comes to undergrads, typically we don't have a specific recruitment mechanism. Undergrads are just often emailed throughout the year, and depending on our needs, we'll potentially take some on. Typically undergrads will work with a grad student or with a postdoc, and this is a big part of their development as well, and this is often what determines whether or not we'll be taking an undergrad. Meaning often a grad student will come into my office and say, it'd be really helpful if I had somebody to help me out with some tissue processing or with data analysis. Is there anybody who's been looking for a position? And I'll go back through my emails and see what I've gotten in terms of inquiries, and that's often how we end up deciding that we're going to be looking for an undergrad. In terms of the types of work that undergrads do, it really varies in our lab. We've had, of the 40 or so undergrads we've had, 5 or 6 have really, I would say, blossomed, did senior theses. 3 of them actually joined the lab as graduate students later. And then the rest, it's sort of it's a variety. Some have sort of maintained sort of an arm's distance with the work, not really done a whole lot, and then others sort of everywhere in between. And so typically, because we're not, at least I'm not quite sure how committed somebody is, and maybe I should have them, sign a memorandum of understanding or have some sort of formalized way of setting this thing up. We'll often put them on a project where they're just sort of observing, seeing how often neuroanatomy is done, maybe doing some data processing, meaning taking spreadsheets and taking data from one spreadsheet and moving it to another spreadsheet, sort of grunt work that isn't, if somebody isn't doing a good job, often it's kind of obvious and we can always start again. But then over time, depending on how they do, we may increase their level of responsibility. And that's the reason why we like to get students who are early in their education process. Second semester freshmen, sophomores, somebody emails me just before their junior and certainly their senior year, I would be a lot less interested in taking them on in the lab, because usually it takes a good year or two until they're actually able to learn enough to actually help the lab and to be productive. So the earlier you start, the better. But we've had undergrads that begin sort of in this way, just kind of observing and maybe learning some neuroanatomy techniques, working with fixed tissue, where again, if they have some trouble with it or doesn't work out so well, it's usually not a tremendous loss to the lab. But then over time, we've had several have gotten to the point where they're working completely independently of any graduate student or any postdoc, reporting directly to me, meaning we meet once a week or once every 2 weeks to touch base, but they're doing their own surgeries, they're doing their own perfusions and experiments, etc. We've had several undergrads on publications, and this really seems to me to depend on the student. If the student is really motivated and really, is thinking about science as a career, they'll often really dive into it. And others, this time in the lab is often their time to realize, well, maybe science isn't for me as a career. And I think that's a valuable experience to get in the lab and realize what's not for you, and maybe don't get quite as involved in the lab. So that's more or less what the expectations are for undergrads. Again, typically they begin in the second semester of their freshman year, first semester of their sophomore year. I like them to stay until they graduate, if they're willing to do that. And summers as well. There's grant programs available through MCB, there's grant programs through Beckman as well that can help support undergrad students. So usually there's a mechanism to support students who are going to stay here during the summertime. A couple of words of advice, just from somebody who gets these emails in terms of what would actually pique my interest. I think it's probably the case that many faculty members get many emails from interested undergrads. Far too many emails, far too many inquiries for us to be able to take everybody. And so the question is, what would the advice be that I could give you to make sure that you have an email that will get a response? First of all, please spell the professor's name correctly and refer to them by their last name. I had somebody email me, "Hey Dan," one time as the intro to their email. They actually got a position in the lab because they were pretty exceptional. But the point is, be respectful. And you should say something in your email. If this is a cold email, you've never met this person before, about their research. Look through it. All of us have all of our papers available online. Look through, to the extent that you can, what they've done, and indicate why you're interested in their lab. Talk about their research. I'm interested in the work that you do on XYZ, so they know that it's not just a canned email. If their name is in one font and the text is in a different font and is totally generic, then you're probably not going to get a response. And if you don't get a response, I certainly wouldn't take it personally, just because all of us get lots of emails like this all the time. The other bit of advice that I would give, I've had a couple of students, and I'd be happy to get your opinions on this as well. I've had a couple of students who felt that the way to really maximize their research experience was to try to work with multiple professors while they're here. And I understand maybe they're trying to get lots of letters of recommendation, etc. My feeling is when you get into a laboratory, there's so much that you can gain from that one laboratory. There's, as an undergraduate spending 15 hours a week in that lab, your job is really to try to master all of this material as best you can and to really shine in that lab to the point where hopefully you could submit a senior thesis or get your name potentially on a publication, or even be a lead author on a publication. And I really don't see how that's possible if you're splitting your time between, of course, a heavy workload in school, labs, multiple labs, and perhaps other extracurricular activities. It strikes me as not a particularly good strategy to be able to really, shine during this particular opportunity. So I think those are the main points that I wanted to cover. So maybe I could hang out for a little while and answer questions with Dr. Blinky and see if there's questions you guys have.
couple of different perspectives just in these two professors that are here. I like to have Dr. Blinky come because he has a very well laid out and strategic plan in terms of finding people in his lab. You will find that other faculty members are just very whimsical, and whoever shows up to talk to them, they'll consider it and then they'll take them or they won't take them. So again, every professor is different. You need to know what their expectations are. Do you have questions for these two faculty members who came and spent their time with us today? Yeah.
If one has any relevant experience or skills in, say, data analysis, would it be helpful to mention those in the introductory email?
Yeah, I guess what I would say, if you don't mind, I'll take it first. So yeah, so in the introductory email, you should definitely send your resume along with the email, and yeah, and whatever relevant experience you have on there, particularly if it's data processing, you program in a particular language, or did high school research. We had somebody recently email and indicate they did a bunch of tissue processing in high school, and I thought that was pretty interesting. I also have my graduate students or postdocs, whoever is going to be the person to potentially accept that student, they're the ones who do the initial interview and they evaluate the resume. And I had a graduate student who was totally impressed by an undergrad who had operated a forklift when she was in high school. He thought that was the coolest thing, and indicated a real work ethic in that particular person. So yeah, put your CV in there and indicate whatever relevant or seemingly irrelevant experience you might have, because we'll want to see that.
Yeah, just one thing to add to the occasionally we'll get emails where it's in. A person will say, "I'm familiar with," and then about 1,000 different techniques. And so what that tells us immediately is probably heard of them, may have read about them, but it's good to be, I think, as exact and as straightforward as possible in describing what you've done. And it's not necessarily, it really isn't that much of a negative if you don't have experience. It really doesn't have to be at all. So you shouldn't be afraid of that at all, that part.
And that actually is part of our undergraduate student profile that you fill out. It asks if you have any previous research experience, and you can say what you want there. I think there's a place for just general comments as well, so that is there. Other questions for our faculty? Yeah.
So yes, we definitely don't expect any particular experience, right? So if your resume just says that you worked at McDonald's or whatever in high school and that's it, that's perfectly fine. In the email that you sent to us to talk about other things that we're looking for, I did forget to mention, I'll give you my take on undergraduate grades and how much they matter to me. For me, they don't matter that much, right? To do well in school, I think, is sort of a different skill than doing well in the lab. They both involve commitment, but there are plenty of examples of people who are great scientists who just weren't great students, and vice versa. In fact, I think when it comes to GRE scores, I think they're really predictive of how people do in grad school in the classroom portion, but not particularly predictive of how they do in the science portion. That said, if you completely trashed your grades your first couple of years, that would be a little bit concerning, but I wouldn't, if you weren't the greatest student in the world, I wouldn't be discouraged. At least for me, and I mentioned other faculty members like me, who that's not a major consideration. I'm much more impressed if you've done research or done other kinds of activities that indicate that you can sustain a commitment to something.
We're going to move on now to our student panel, and so we have Diana here and Abby and Thomas sitting together. If you guys want to come on down, I'm going to ask you one at a time to introduce yourselves. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
And just talk about how you found the research position that you have, I guess first just introduce who you are, what your school, your well, I think we're all MCB majors, or I wouldn't have invited you here. Maybe what your long-term goals are, and just a little bit about what you do in the lab, things that you think that a student would like to know.
I'll hold it. I don't really know how this works. Hi, I'm Diana. I'm a junior, as you can see up there. I work in Dr. Yano's lab, who just spoke. Amazing professor and man all in one, so great job, great time working there, I guess. MCB major, Spanish minor. I've been working there for 3 semesters now, so like they both said, it's really important to stay in there for quite some time to get the best possible experience you can out of it. In the future, I want to go to medical school, and I know a lot of you said something like that as well. I'm not looking to do a PhD right now, but who knows, that might change. So, like Dr. Yano said, it is an auditory neuroscience lab. So we look at how complex sounds such as speech are processed by the auditory system. We look at different parts of the brain and how they communicate when you're hearing different things. I, as a student, do a lot of tissue processing, and it's okay if you don't know what a lot of these techniques are right now, because I didn't either. And I started my 2nd semester freshman year, so they teach you a lot, if that shows you anything. I'm also starting on some anatomy projects, so like he said, perfusions, doing things with fixed tissues, looking at them under microscopes, taking pictures of them, imaging. We put tracers into one part of the brain and then look at where they end up.
How did you find your research?
Oh, I emailed. So I did exactly what I went to this presentation when I was a freshman, and I looked on the website. I researched neuroscience because that's what I wanted to do. And I found Dr. Yano, but I also found a bunch of other professors. I emailed about 10 professors, and like Tina said, don't email them all at once. I did about 5 at a time. But he didn't get back to me for quite some time, which is super understandable because he's so busy, and all the other professors are so busy. You might not get any response. You might get a response months later, and that's totally fine. They're really, like I said, super busy people, so make your email very short and sweet. Just show them who you are, why you're interested, and that's all. Say thank you, because they don't have time to read a whole paragraph of an email. So, okay.
Hi guys, I am Abby, and I'm a junior in the MCB Honors Program. And I am just starting my 3rd semester in Dr. Lori Reitzman's lab. So she's in the Department of Molecular and Integrative Physiology, and she also does neuroscience. She's in that program. And we work with a cell-to-cell mechanism called Notch signaling. And we kind of ask how Notch signaling leads to the differentiation of stem cells in the pituitary gland. And so I was initially interested in this work because I also am a pre-med student. I hope to do primary care someday. But I was interested in kind of the more physiology part of lab work, and how I could tie it into, learning about the human body more. And also, as a future, hopefully, medical student, I kind of wanted that perspective of how do we know what we know, and how do we kind of like obtain the information we learn. So that's kind of why I chose a kind of more physiology and neuroscience lab. And kind of repeating what she said, the first year, how I found the lab. So I found the lab because I actually took a class with Dr. Reitzman my freshman year. I don't know if they still do discovery courses. Oh, it was such a good class. But there was 13 girls in the class, and it was phenomenal. And it was kind of just like a introductory class to MCB and endocrinology, and so it was great. But whenever I So I looked into different research labs spring of my freshman year, kind of in looking forward to sophomore year. So I didn't start my freshman year, but I emailed people like during spring break. So during spring break my freshman year, I was like, okay, here's kind of what I'm looking for, something more physiology based, and so I narrowed it down to 3 professors that I was interested in, and I sent them all an email, and one of them was Dr. Reitzman, and then the other 2 I just kind of like what has been said, I sent why I'm interested, and I made sure to highlight some of their work. I did some research on what they do, and then I sent my unofficial transcript and also a resume in the email. And then they all 3 replied, but one of them said, well, we aren't looking for anyone right now, but I'll like keep you on, like on the list or whatever. So I then interviewed with 2 of the 3, and I actually, in the lab that I didn't end up choosing, I actually spent like 3 weeks kind of rotating in it to see if I actually enjoyed the lab, because that's what she recommended doing. So I just followed an undergraduate student who was doing undergraduate research, and she just like showed me what she was doing, and I probably spent 5 hours a week for those 3 weeks. And at the same time, I was also like interviewing with Dr. Reitzman's lab, and then I was just kind of like, Dr. Reitzman's lab fit more with what I was looking for. And so then I just told the other professor that there was one that piqued my interest a little bit more, and she was completely understanding, because the reason that she wanted us to kind of rotate a little in the lab was for that very reason. So yeah, I think that is it. But oh yeah, going off what she said, it does take like a full year almost before you feel confident in yourself, because lab work is very hard. You learn like PCR and stuff in class, and you learn it kind of like the cognitive side, but then actually putting it to work is a completely different story. And so I'm really glad that I started out with the whole data processing thing, and then tissue processing, and then actually right now I just started my own project under the grad student I work for. So it does take a long time before you feel even confident enough to like do a IHC by yourself. And don't be afraid to mess up, because you mess up all the time, and they understand that, because don't feel bad about yourself. So yeah.
Yeah, I have to do like a whole presentation of stuff I've messed up for all the new undergrads. Anyways, my name's Thomas Bain. I'm a junior in MCB Honors, and I guess I should explain why I'm the only one here who's not in the MCB lab. So my career goals, I want to go to medical school, be an orthopedic surgeon, so interested in bones, muscles, tendons, ligaments, that sort of thing. So what I did was I basically just Googled UIUC research, and then I typed in bones, tendons, muscles, ligaments, and then I looked through a bunch of papers, and eventually I found the Wheeler papers, and they're all about regenerative bone medicine. So essentially, if you have comminuted fractures where the bone's shattered, you use tissue engineering with a scaffold and different stem cells within it to regenerate that bone, drastically reducing the healing process for it. So I was like, wow, that's awesome. That's totally what I want to do in the future. So I emailed him, I let him know, I was like, I've read your papers, they sound exactly like what I want to do in the future. Like, even if I was an orthopedic surgeon, I would want to continue helping with this type of research, and I attached my resume and all that stuff, and they emailed me back saying, we'd love to have you on. So I started the summer of my freshman year, which I really recommend working over the summer. I think the position I'm in my lab right now, I don't think I'd be in it if I didn't work over the summer. So I worked over my freshman summer, and then I worked over my sophomore summer as well. And I think it's just like, it's like the first summer was basically just me finding stuff that's wrong with the project, and I wasn't blamed. They don't care if you mess up, it's okay. But essentially, by the time I'm now, I've basically worked out all the kinks, and I've actually been able to help. I'm in a position now where I can help teach other undergrads who are now joining the lab to not repeat the same mistakes I've made. So yeah, I've actually I've had a lot of experience in it. I've already put out 2 abstracts into the International Engineering Tissue Sciences or something. I think it's IETS. That's the program. I'm actually currently working on a paper that combines a bunch of it. So yeah, it's definitely research is a good experience, and it's important to start early because like the later it is, you're not going to be at the level that you need to be to actually get. If you want to have stuff published, you won't be at that level if you apply too late. Is there anything else?
Okay, so I specifically invited you because you weren't in an MCB lab, and I wanted students to see that there was a lot you can do outside of MCB as well. Do you have questions for these students? They're doing what you hope to be doing. Diana, I don't know if I should put you on the spot for this, but you were in a lab previously, right? So you tried it out, and do you mind talking about how you started there and why you are not doing that again?
Yeah. So I was in a different neuroscience lab freshman year too. I was kind of trying out both of them. And this lab, I was doing more of things that I just didn't enjoy. I really liked the professor and the graduate student and everyone else in the lab too, so it was actually really hard for me to tell them that I shouldn't be working there. And it was a great experience too, so I can still talk about it as well. But that one was researching depression and neurotransmitters and stuff. It was so cool. But we did a lot of just reading papers and discussing them, which a lot of students really enjoyed in the lab, but I did not want to be doing that. I wanted to be doing more hands-on work, which is what I get in this lab. So I guess that's how I realized that I should switch labs. And you should never stay in something that you don't enjoy, so yeah.
Thank you. So I wanted her to talk about that because one of the things that you'll find is maybe you don't like research. That's okay. You have learned something from that. If you get into a lab, even if you get into it and say, I'm committing until I graduate, the professor isn't going to want you to stay there if that's not the right place for you. So what you have to do is get up the courage to have a conversation with them and say, listen, this is not exactly what I thought it was going to be. I know I committed to X, but I'm not sure that that's the best use of my time or the best use of your time. You want to make sure that you part on good terms because you may need that person for a letter of recommendation in the future, or you may need that person to get your next research position. So it is okay to try it and decide that's not what you want to do. Okay? Faculty members are usually very understanding. They don't want to waste their time any more than they want you to waste your time. You just have to be honest with them. I know it can sometimes be scary to talk to them, but they're just regular people. Okay, I have just a couple more slides, but do you have any other questions for our student panel? Yeah.
How challenging is it to balance your academics versus your time in the lab?
That's a great question. So I'll let each of them just talk about how they balance their time in the lab versus their academics.
So I work 10 hours a week in my lab, and mine's pretty structured. I come in the same times every week. So at the beginning of the semester, I just talked with my grad student, and I sat down with her, and we just okay, when is the best time? So you usually need at least 4 hours blocked out time. You can't just come in for 1 or 2 to run your experiments. But it's kind of hard now that I'm starting my own project because it's a lot, I'm doing a lot more of learning because all the things, you'll learn really quickly that all the things that your lab does, everyone in your lab is an expert in except you, and so it takes a lot of work to just learn what stem cells actually are and what that kind of looks like in regards to research aspects. So it is hard, but again, if you are committed to it, then you'll make it a priority. And I would recommend being consistent in the hours that you come in. Makes it a lot easier, because then it feels kind of like a structured job instead of just going in when you feel like it.
Yeah, kind of going off that, it's important to budget your time. So I've been lucky in my lab. They have the policy of, you work as long as you need to get everything that you need to get done, and you come in when you can. So I try and find little blocks in my schedule of like, yeah, you definitely can't do an hour. You can't just do it between like an hour gap between class. You need at least 2 hours, probably more. So I try and find little gaps, even if that's after your classes. Like say you end class at like 2, you go in from lab 2 to 4. That works. So it's really it depends on what lab you're in, but I would communicate with your graduate student or your postdoc or whoever you're working under, and I would show them your schedule and I'd be like, these are the times that I'm available, do they work for you? So I would definitely make that more personal.
Do you guys work many evenings, weekends? Can you talk about that a little bit? Or is it usually during the work week?
I've been lucky. I've not been having to come in. I've been working on the weekends like once, and that was when we were actually putting our scaffold into a pig. So that was kind of a special circumstance. But other than that, I've been pretty lucky. I usually get done around 5 every day during the week.
Yeah, I've only had to work one weekend too, and that's just because our experiment didn't run. So again, if you kind of had that perspective of I don't want to fall behind, then you might come in, and it's not too much work. And if you really enjoy it, then it's kind of fun to come in on the weekend. It's a lot chill.
I've never had to work on a weekend yet. I have class every day, like 8 to 5, and they understand that except Thursday and Friday when I'm done at 2, so they want me to come in at 2. So it's perfect. So you just have to communicate with them, and they're very understanding. But basically, yeah, I just work week hours basically.
So that should give you a really nice perspective on undergraduate research. What it is, how to get involved. You heard from a couple of the faculty, you heard from some students. One of the things that I want to tell you is don't be too freaked out by what they said about the commitment. So those of you that are freshmen and sophomores, you're at the prime time to be looking for research. That's who they're really looking for. If you are a junior and senior, don't freak out and think that there's no possible way that you'll ever find a position in lab. A lot of times, if you look outside of MCB, if you're looking for more of a short-term project, you might find faculty members outside of MCB who are able to do that. Psychology might be a place that you can look. Some of the, I don't know so much about crop science or animal science, but if you're looking for something shorter term, you might be able to do that. You might be able to do just a summer research internship somewhere. On the MCB advising website, you can find some, we do have a couple of links to summer programs. I don't know if it's been completely updated yet, but that might be something that you look into. I know Dr. Yano had mentioned that you can get some scholarships to do summer undergraduate research. So if you get involved in a lab, in the summer, MCB will for sure have 7 scholarships available for students who are doing undergraduate research. You'll have to apply for it, most likely in January, February. Watch for something to come out in Roadmap. But there are going to be 5 that are worth $5,000 for the summer, 2 that are for women in science that are $3,000 for the summer, and I believe the School of MCB is going to be sponsoring some students as well. I don't know how many, and I don't know what the dollar amount will be, but that's something that you can look for. If staying in the summer, if that concerns you because of money for having to have an apartment or something like that, those are things that you can look into. And there are labs that don't require you to work during the summer, so I didn't want you to stress out too much about that. Okay, so just a little bit about graduation with distinction. If you get involved in undergraduate research, if you stick with it for at least 2 semesters, and each of those semesters you sign up for MCB 290 and you're earning at least 2 credit hours in those 2 semesters. Then in your final semester on campus, this is the important thing, you can only do MCB 492 in your final semester on campus. And this is what you would do if you want to write a senior thesis and you're hoping to earn distinction at graduation. So in MCB there are several ways to earn distinction. You can earn it through academics. If you have a major GPA of 3.9 or higher in the final semester before you graduate, or in your penultimate semester before you graduate, you can earn academic distinction. There are 3 ways to earn research distinction. One is to do research, MCB 290 research, for at least 3 semesters and then present that research at a symposium. There's a campus-wide symposium every spring that you can attend, or you might be able to travel to a conference with your lab to give a poster presentation. So that allows you to earn distinction. If you want to earn high or highest distinction, then you have to present a poster. You have to have a minimum GPA of 3.25 for high distinction, a minimum GPA of 3.9 for highest, and then you also have to write a senior thesis. And so in those cases, you would register for MCB 492. You would have to have the support of the faculty member that you're working with. They need to know that you've done enough and that you have enough data to present and to write about. And then you need to make sure that you register by the appropriate deadlines. Again, there's a lot of information that you can find on our website about distinction, and if you want more information, you're more than welcome to make an appointment to meet with me to talk about that further, but I think the first step is just getting you into MCB 290. Any general questions about research distinction? All right, you guys have stuck with me for almost an hour and a half. That shows some good commitment. You're on the path to getting a research position. This is just some take-home points. So you can earn course credit by registering for MCB 290 and getting research credit. You want to make sure that you start early in looking for research. So if you start freshman or sophomore year and looking for it, that's great, but I guess a little bit more of a timeline. So those of you right now, it's probably too late to find research for this fall. You might be able to shadow a student in lab for a couple of weeks, kind of rotate through like Abby was talking about. You might be able to do that, but you're not going to be able to earn research credit this fall because we've already passed all of the deadlines to do that. What I would suggest is if you're looking for something in the spring, that you start sending those emails out probably end of October, beginning of November. That would be a good time to start looking for spring research. If you can't do spring research, if you're not ready for that yet and you want to wait to do it for summer or fall, then I would say right after spring break. That's a good time to look for a summer position or a fall position. So that's what I would suggest. Biggest take-home point is know that all of our faculty are different, especially if you're looking in different colleges on this campus. Make sure you know what the faculty expects of you, who you will be working with, how often you need to be there. Make sure you treat it as a job. Be respectful of their time, be professional. You will make mistakes. That's the thing about research. I did research for 8.5 years after I graduated, and sometimes you run the same experiment 20 times before you get it right. So you learn a lot from your failures. You figure out what went wrong, what you can do better next time. Don't be afraid to fail. They're not going to kick you out of the lab. But do be respectful. And then the last thing is just make sure you have fun. Learn a lot. This is a really great opportunity for all of you.